Colorado was obviously the talk of the college football season, but there was a clear point in the season where things went wrong, and it was right after that Stanford loss, and it went ugly right after that.
You are Locked On Buffs, your daily podcast on the Colorado Buffaloes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Buffs. I am your host, Kevin Borber. Today's episode of Locked On Buffs is brought to you by the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day for free and available wherever you get your podcasts. We're also brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Today's episode, we are talking about the Coach Prime doc. New episode dropped, episode 5. I believe there's only 6. And it was titled Soul Searching. And obviously, it was all about Colorado. It covered them, the Arizona State game, which they won, which was right after they lost to USC and Oregon. And then they go Arizona State and they have Stanford. And so you could tell these are being recorded. These interviews are being recorded as the season goes on, as documentaries are. And you could tell that Colorado was very confident in where they were. And why wouldn't they be? You know, you win your first 3 games, you lose a couple to the best teams in the Pac-12 or 2 of the best teams in the Pac-12. And it's like, okay, so we're not Pac-12 title contender good yet, but we're still hanging around. They had a chance against USC. They had some game management issues and stuff like that. But either way, you get to the Arizona State game. It was an ugly win. And then you get to the Stanford game and yikes. I wish they would have shown more about that game because I think we learned a lot about the team at that point right there. Realistically, you could tell there was kind of a shift inside the program doors. There was a shift in and around. You could tell after the losses to Oregon and USC that not everyone had lost confidence, but they lost confidence. They lose Travis Hunter. He comes back for the Stanford game. But even then, you could kind of tell in the way that they were recording the coaches. They preview at the end of the episode, Pat Shurmur taking over the play call. After one of the games, Corey Phillips is talking to the team, has all 11 starters stand up, and he goes, I can replace every one of you. And he points at Shedeur. He says, I can replace him too. And which obviously we know is not going to happen. It's not true. He's one of the best quarterbacks in the country. But it's just one of those things that coaches say when obvious things aren't going well. But there was obviously like a mental lull for this team. Like they were just like, we just got punched in the mouth 3 times and we don't know what happened. Like they had no explanation for it. They were literally just like, what? And then also Coach Prime has one of the offensive linemen stand up and he goes, why aren't you taking their spot? Like, why are you not taking their spots on the starting offensive line? Like it was a really interesting. I think it was kind of like not a move of desperation in the locker room, but you could just tell that obviously they were looking for a spark and they were not getting that spark. And I think we got a little bit closer of a look of Coach Prime's speech to the team after the Stanford loss when he's talking about how, well, one, he goes, we're practicing tomorrow, which is obviously the last thing anyone wants to hear. But it was just one of those things where it was like, oh, wow. Yeah, he had Kareem Harden stand up, by the way. And he was just like, what are you doing? Like, why are you not taking their spots? And he was like, I don't know. And so I think at that point, he's just looking around and he's realizing that one, I don't think he knew this. Like, he didn't think his team was bad because he said straight up after the Stanford loss that they lost to a team that they had better players in. And they should have won that game. And obviously, when you build a 29-point lead and everything's going well, you can't have that. And I think in the game, it kind of showcased just the overall struggles that they had. Defensively, they weren't able to tackle anybody. Defensively, they had no answer for Stanford's adjustments. And honestly, Shedeur Sanders, he missed a lot of throws. And I think that kind of allowed Stanford to get back into the game. And it was just those combinations of Colorado not putting up points enough to where they had to rely on their defense. And obviously that's not what their defense was capable of doing at all. And it just kind of showed us how vulnerable this team was, not only on the field, because obviously you needed big games for Shedeur Sanders every week, and you need him to play nearly perfect every week for this team to win. But it also showed how vulnerable they were just as like a team. Like they were rattled emotionally. They were rattled as a football team. They kind of seemed like they had no idea what was next. And then they go to UCLA, they lose, they get just straight up out physicaled. And they kind of allude to, I think the meeting, by the way, was after the UCLA game. They kind of push it all together. So sometimes I forget which is which, but the meeting where the coach is like talking to the players about like why you can't replace him. Because I think that's what it was. But either way, it's just one of those things where you look at this team and you're like, I see why it went wrong. They were not ready for adversity. And this is my biggest takeaway is this team was built for confidence and built for having success, but they were not built for experiencing failure. And as soon as they experienced failure, all things went out the window. Because it's about to get real ugly on the dock. Obviously, I think there's only one episode left, and they lost every game the rest of the season. So it's going to be a lot of emotional, like a lot of hard hitting stuff because it's like, oh my gosh, another loss. And then you see players like, which this happens on every football team across the country. It's just the level of buy-in just wasn't there for some of the guys. Like Bishop Thomas has been the center of the dock in a way, and he had like 6 total tackles, and he's missing meetings. He's just not where doing what he needs to do. And you could tell the coaches were frustrated. Coach Prime said he's one of his favorite players on the team, but he's just not grown up yet. One of the other coaches goes up to Bishop and is like, "Do you know what you need to do?" And Bishop's like, "Yeah, I'm doing it." And the coach was like, "You're literally not. Like you are not doing it." And I think that's kind of a obviously they're focused on Bishop, but I feel like that's kind of the whole approach to this team was just like we didn't have what we needed to win. Like we didn't have the mentality. Obviously, they didn't have the playmakers. Well, they had the playmakers. They didn't have the depth in the trenches, and they just had more problems than what they were aware of. But Shadur Sanders was covering up a lot of issues. The offense was covering up a lot of issues, and when the offense kind of started to fizzle, everything went to the wayside, and I was just really shocked. I liked how Coach Prime is handling it. I think one thing that I'll always compliment him for is he doesn't shy away when most college football teams lose and they're expected to win or they have a lot of hype around them. Like Colorado had a lot of hype. I wouldn't say they were expected to win, but there was a ton of hype around them. He doesn't shy away from questions. He doesn't shy away from why is, for instance, Cormani not playing? He goes, Cormani is not doing what he needs to do, plain and simple. An answer that most coaches would be like, you know what, it's just one of those things. We're going to keep it in house. And I think a lot of what Coach Prime takes flack for is he says whatever he's thinking, and I appreciate his openness because obviously we don't want to have to kind of make assumptions about players, or we don't want to have to be like, oh, what is happening? What is happening? There's like this charade that a lot of coaches like to play. And Coach Prime's like, no, this player right here, player A, is not doing what he needs to do. And it's hurting him, it's hurting the team, and it's holding us back. And I just thought that was really interesting that he's very transparent with everything because obviously he could have easily just closed off from everybody and kind of made it difficult to know what was going on within the program. But that's not something he does. And so I thought that was interesting. But those were my biggest takeaways. What was your biggest takeaway? Also, didn't know Travis Hunter was such an avid fisherman, but we've learned that from there. And then obviously the recent post when he was in Dallas with the Sanders family. But jack of all trades, that Travis. He could do a little bit of everything, and it's just impressive, I guess. I've never fished a day in my life, and maybe Travis Hunter's the guy to teach me. This episode of Locked On Buffs is brought to you by our sponsors over at FanDuel. As the weather gets colder, the NFL offers stay hot on FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action than right now. The app is super easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options that include spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel is the official partner of the NFL. Welcome back to Locked On Buffs. Thank you for making me your first listen of the day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Subscriber count is going up. I appreciate you guys. Appreciate all the support. New Year's resolution, not for me. Mine's the basic one. Getting a little bit better shape, obviously. Just manage my time better would be another one. But resolutions for Colorado. And we were talking about this in my work group chat because obviously it applies to just about everything and everywhere. And there's a lot of questions as to how to improve your team and how to improve your program. And I think for Colorado, they have a huge resolution this next year, which is to get better in the trenches and be more physical. I think one of the things that Colorado has been missing is the physicality aspect. Now, a lot of people were saying they were a small team, they were undersized, they were this, they were that, and Colorado was like, no, we're not, blah blah blah. And truth is, even if they weren't undersized, they just weren't physical enough. The offensive line was pushed over nonstop. I think realistically, in the doc, you started to notice how injured Shadur was after the UCLA game, even the Stanford game in a way. Uh, Also, the Stanford game. I want to go back to that real quick. It kind of showed us because Coach Prime always hypes up his players. He never is negative towards his players in the media, but he goes up to Shadur after I think he took a sack or he made a bad throw, something like that, and he's like, "Dude, you cost us the field goal." And like it was just an interesting relationship dynamic there. But a lot of the issues that Shadur Sanders has or had this past season was because he's always running for his life. A lot of the issues the defense had in terms of stopping the run is because they weren't physical enough. So my New Year's resolution for Colorado is to be more physical in the trenches. The more physical you are in the trenches, the better you are at initiating the run, initiating contact, stopping the run, and getting pressure on the quarterback. They could not do any of those things. I think the biggest weakness that Colorado had was that they simply were just out physicaled every game. There wasn't a single game where, even the Nebraska game where they beat Nebraska handily, even Colorado State, which was a team they were favored by like I think it was 2 touchdowns or 3 touchdowns or something like that. They weren't more physical than a single opponent all year. And it's one you're not going to be more physical than programs like Utah or even Nebraska is known for physicality, but like Colorado's pretty physical compared to Nebraska. Either way, Nebraska's still getting pressure. But like Utah or like even the Big 12, Iowa State, Baylor's pretty physical. Like you're not always going to be more physical than these teams. But you cannot have 12 games on your schedule and be out physical in all 12. It just is not a recipe for success. I think Colorado's biggest goal or biggest issues. Sorry, I was reading my little handy dandy on today's show thing and said the word goals. You could just not be that weak of a team, that soft of a team, and expect to win. And I think that comes from their lack of passion. I think it comes from them not having the right system at hand. Obviously, Sean Lewis did not put that offense line in the right position to succeed. And obviously, Coach Prime didn't put the offense line and his coaches and staff members who recruited in the right position because that wasn't a good group to put together. It just wasn't. It was backups from FCS schools, or it was starters from FCS schools, backups from Power 5 schools, and it just isn't going to get the job done. You look at the line this year, way better. This line has starters. Everyone started at the FBS level. These guys they know what they're doing. They know what it's like to play at the highest level. They got some Power 5 experience in there and at Indiana, at Houston, at Texas. And it's just one of those things where it's like this offense line compared to Colorado's offense line last year, you plug them in, Colorado probably gives up, we'll say, even if it's because they gave up 56 sacks, I think the number is. If they gave up 40 sacks or 35 sacks, Colorado's a 7-8 win team. A lot of the times teams took advantage of Colorado is when the offensive line started to get pushed around and the offense stopped having success and they changed the coverages a little bit and made Shadur Sanders made it easier so there wasn't like he couldn't take shots, he couldn't find the open space, and they were just sustaining coverage and allowing their defense line to get pressure. And that's not what this Colorado offense line was built for by any means. And we saw it constantly. And so get more physical up front. Same thing with the defense line. I think Colorado's offense line being so bad took attention off of the defense line, but the defense line was, I won't say equally as bad, but they were not good. They couldn't get pressure. They couldn't stop the run. And they made life more difficult on anyone else because obviously when you're in the secondary and you can't get pressure on the quarterback, gives the quarterback more time to find receivers. It gives the receivers more time to kind of adjust and run around and get open and find the open spot. And this Colorado defense, realistically, they have good secondary members. It's the trenches. The offense had good skill positions players. It's the trenches. You got to get better in the trenches. If you're not going to get better in the trenches, you won't win games. And I think Colorado could win games, but they realistically need to step that up. And I think they are getting the right pieces. I really do. I just think that was kind of like my biggest takeaway in the doc and in general of what I think that their goals for next year should be. Because obviously it was just not a good showing by any means. This episode of Locked on Buffs is brought to you by Game Time. You shouldn't have to worry when you're buying tickets to your next big event. It shouldn't be a stressful process. It should just be a ABC, boom, we're ready to go, have some fun. And Game Time is exactly that. They're fast and easy. and they have ways to buy all sorts of tickets, whether it's sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. They have killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Go to gametime.com and you can buy your tickets. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets too. It's just really easy. I use them to go to all the sporting events that I'm not credentialed to go to, whether it's NBA or whatever it may be. And you find the cheapest seats at great spots, and it's super easy. So download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and use code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE, Locked On College, for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Welcome back to Locked On Buffs. I appreciate you guys for making me your first listen of the day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast. Goals for 2024 if you're Colorado. I think these goals may come off as lofty, but I think they're realistic goals. Limit the sacks to, because Shedeur Sanders, I don't know his offense line situation at Jackson State. I'm not going to pretend like I was dialed into Jackson State football week in and week out. Shedeur Sanders has been sacked a lot over his career. It just is what it is. In his 3 years of college football, let me make sure I have the number right. Shedeur has been sacked a total of 110 times. He was sacked 35 times as a freshman, 23 times as a sophomore, which is when he had his best year. He threw for 40 touchdowns and 6 picks. And then he was sacked 52 times this year and threw 27 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. If Shedeur Sanders is sacked only like, say, 30 times, which I still think is like average or below average, this team, that changes the whole dynamic for the team. So allow less than 30 sacks. That seems like such a bad number, but it's like what we saw last year. It's got to be better. Having a 1,000-yard rusher. No, well, let's scratch that. Have a competent running game. Have a run game that could make life easier for Shedeur Sanders in the offense. Have a run game that could scare defenses and make them respect you, because obviously when they know you can't run the ball, they do not care. They're just dropping everybody into coverage because they know that Shedeur Sanders is going to have to make throws, which Shedeur Sanders makes those throws all the time. But they know that the more they cover the receivers, the more likely Shedeur Sanders is able to be, or is going to be, sacked. So have a useful running game, whether it's Alton McCaskill, Dylan Edwards, whoever it may be, Cameron McKell, I don't know, don't care. Have a run game that complements the passing game. So less than 30 sacks. I want to say 1,000-yard rusher, but we'll just say have a rushing attack in general. I think that's a good one. Realistically, on defense, stopping the run. You got to stop the run more. You can't allow teams to just shove it down your throats every game and expect to win. I think the biggest tell of this was when they played against Utah, and Utah was starting a JUCO quarterback who had never played Power 5 football, and they won. They were just running the ball. They were being physical, and Colorado was unable to kind of stick around and was unable to win that game, and it just was not what they needed. I think defensively, force more turnovers. I think Colorado was really good at forcing turnovers, but they need more timely turnovers. And it's just one of those things where you got to have timely turnovers. And I think Colorado's good at forcing turnovers, but they need a few more if they're going to win more games, because I think they could win. And then biggest goal, I think, is contend for the Big 12 title game. I think the Big 12 is weak. I really do. Kansas is going to be solid. Jalen Daniels has had injury issues, though. I don't know how much I trust him. Texas Tech was supposed to run the Big 12. They were supposed to be the dark horse of the Big 12 this year, and they were not. They were average to below average. TCU fallen off. They were a one-hit wonder, it seems. Iowa State is past their best days. They're kind of just a middle-of-the-pack team. West Virginia is good, but I think West Virginia's reached their ceiling this year. I don't know. But I don't see, there's not a team in the Big 12 right now outside of Arizona and Utah, assuming that Utah is able to be healthy, that worries me. There's really not. I'm sure that there's going to be some team that emerges, like UCF is the favorite to land KJ Jefferson from Arkansas. Maybe they're a different team with him at quarterback. I don't know. I don't think so. But there's really not a Big 12 team that scares me at all. I think Colorado could be contending for the Big 12 title game. I think it just depends on what my other goals were for them. If they reach at least 2 or 3 of those goals, they should be contending. You comment below what you think the realistic goals for Colorado should be. I think obviously they're contending for the Big 12. They're obviously contending for the playoff just because of the new playoff rules. But Colorado has a lot to improve on. They have a lot to get better at. And if they don't, it's going to be another mediocre to average season. And then we're going to have a lot of questions about a lot of things of how things are being ran or chosen methods of portal or roster construction. But until then, those are my goals. You comment below what your goals are. On tomorrow's episode, you guys won't want to miss this. We are welcoming onto the show a friend of the show. Let me just tell you real quick. Scott Proctor. He's a Buffaloes reporter for the Coloradan. Obviously, he's a Chicago native, played quarterback back at Blue Gold. He played quarterback at the University of Eau Claire. I believe I'm saying that right, in Wisconsin. Chicago native he is. Covers Coach Prime, covers the Colorado, covers everything. So he's going to bring a lot of insight and knowledge. He's going to tell us all about Colorado. It's going to be a great episode, and you guys won't want to miss it. I appreciate you guys for tuning in to Locked On Buffs and making me your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. I will hope to see you guys tomorrow.